you so much for joining us. My name is Ellen Nickles, and we're here today to speak with our guest, Tom Igoe, at YORB 2020, a wing of the Interactive Telecommunications program at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. I'm a recent graduate of the program and currently a research resident, working along with a wonderful team of residents on the YORB 2020 initiative. This is, in fact, a virtual replica of the physical ITP floor at 370 J Street in Brooklyn, New York. And Tom, we're sitting exactly where your office is located in the physical space.
I don't know if my office is still there, but I'd like to think so.
Y'all may be wondering why here and why not in Tom's actual office. And the reason for that is it's April 2020, and there is a raging pandemic outside. Unless you are an essential worker, you are sheltering in place at home or in YORB, as we are now. And of course, the next question you might be wondering is, what is YORB? And that's exactly why we are here today. Our interview today is one of several that we hope to conduct to help us answer that question. So Tom, we're just delighted to have you with us today to talk about YORB. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at ITP and how long you've been involved in the program?
Yeah, I'm an arts professor at ITP, so I'm one of the full-time faculty, and I've been there full-time since 2001, and prior to that I was an adjunct, and prior to that I was a student, so I've been involved with ITP in various forms since 1995, basically. My role at ITP is I run the physical computing area, which basically we teach people how to build the physical interfaces to digital systems. I guess the reason I'm here is because I was the last research resident on YORB back in 1996. So YORB was an interactive TV show that we used to run on Manhattan Neighborhood Network cable TV back when there was cable TV. It was started by Dan O'Sullivan in, I think, around 92 or so. And basically, we had a time slot in the evenings, way in the evenings. And students would prepare projects that would be shown in the TV show. And people could call in on their phones, and they could navigate through the students' projects using their touch-tone keypad on their phones, back when we had touch-tone keypads on phones.
So your involvement was directly with that TV show and producing that TV show?
Yeah, so I was, like I said, I was a student in 95 to 97. And in the first year I was involved, which would have been spring of 96, I was a student in the class. We had a YORB class, and everybody in the class had to work on a group project to produce one episode of the show. So me and my group produced a virtual version of the bar Max Fish from the Lower East Side. And we showed it in the YORB, and people could come to watch the TV show and they could navigate through our version of Max Fish, essentially.
Do you remember how many visitors you had to Virtual Max Fish when that show aired?
Not at all. I mean, honestly, I think we were so busy just trying to keep the show alive that we didn't pay attention to the stats at all. In fact, I remember, much like this, YORB often had audio problems. And so one of Red Burns' concerns, Red was the founder of ITP, she hated it when people did TV shows that had bad audio. And my only memory of that show afterwards is the next day I came into school and I was very pleased that nothing crashed. And I saw Red by the elevators. And I said, "Hey, Red, did you see YORB last night?" And she's like, "Yes, I did. It was terrible. Your audio sucked." And that was pretty much the only feedback I got from her on the show.
I'm so curious to hear a little bit about the technologies that you use to make this happen.
Sure. So basically, YORB itself was made up of a virtual environment built in a scripting platform called Director. It was made by Macromedia at the time. Later on, Macromedia was bought by Adobe. But basically, it was the tool that we taught Intro to Comp Media in at the time. So there's this virtual environment that you could navigate through with keyboard commands and so forth. And then there was this thing called the Alpha Bus, which was basically an add-on to your computer that would allow you to take input from other physical sensors. You could think of it as the Arduino of its day, except it was a few generations before Arduino. It also wasn't specifically programmable. It just, whatever inputs came in were spat directly into your computer's operating system. So what Dan had done was he had built an interface that read the input from the alpha bus through the serial port of the computer. Actually, it might have been the parallel port now that I think of it. But read the input from the alpha bus and translated it into key codes for Director. One of the things that he added to the alpha bus was what's called a DTMF decoder, which would take touch tone tones and decode them so you knew which key somebody had pressed on their phone. So essentially, the phone was hooked up to the alpha bus was hooked to the computer, and that way you had a way of navigating over the phone lines.
Do you remember some of the folks that you worked with? And can you tell us a little bit about some of your favorite memories?
Yeah, on that project, yes. I worked with Michael Dunn and Sherry Kai and Robert, whose last name I'm forgetting at the moment, were my three partners on that particular project. And our connection to Max Fish was Michael, because he knew the owner of the bar. And so, when we first started the project, he took us down there, and that bar at that time was kind of a sort of hip Lower East Side bar. They would get occasional celebrities in. There were stories of like Courtney Love nodding out in the back while she was doing heroin, this kind of thing. So what we did was we did a few things. First of all, we set up their jukebox. We hooked an extra phone line into the bar, and we wired their jukebox to that phone line. And then back on another server at ITP, we hooked the audio from the jukebox to the net using a software package called Real Audio, which was one of the first streaming audio tools. So that essentially people could come to the web and listen to the jukebox from Max Fish. Then the other thing we did was there was a graphical chat software called The Palace that Time Warner made. And we made a version of the bar in the Palace so that people could essentially do what we're doing here in YORB. They could come to the Max Fish Palace and sit at one of the tables virtually and have a conversation, that kind of thing. And then we also did a bunch of graphic front ends in Director so that people could kind of see what the bar looked like. We also used the other thing that was hot at the time was QuickTime VR, which was essentially a 360-degree video. We did a lot of 360 videos of the bar, except they didn't move because it was 1996, right? You could come into the bar and sort of tour through it by standing in a spot, twirling around, moving to the next spot, twirling around, that kind of thing. Looked at now, it's probably hopelessly dated, but at the time it was like super high tech and crash
Sounds like so much fun. What happened to YORB? How long did it last, and where did it go?
So YORB lasted for probably 5 or 6 years. Dan O'Sullivan could say for sure. But basically what happened was when they started it, Red got some funding from Time Warner to support it. So Time Warner would basically pay for a staff member and for one research assistant from the students. And after Dan, the staff member who took it over was a guy named Nick West. So Nick was on full-time faculty and staff when I was a student. And each year, they would hire a second-year student as the research assistant on YORB. And I think I was the fourth or fifth one, and the last one, as it turns out. And so each year, the mission was basically keep updating the YORB, keeping it moving forward, and so forth. And, Nick would run the class, and he would work with the research resident to keep things running. Excuse me, I think we were called research assistants, not research residents. You guys are research residents. And so a lot of my job in my second year as the research assistant was to make sure YORB still ran, to assist the students, that kind of thing. But in the summer between my first and second years as a student, Red came to Nick and I and said, interactive TV is dead. Do something different. So we kind of looked at each other and went, okay. And I was like, Nick, do we still have jobs? He's like, yeah, no, she didn't say we were not funded. She just said interactive TV was dead. So we've got a whole summer to come up with something new. And that summer, we sort of tried to dream up new possible things to do with YORB. Actually, I think Aiden Nelson's got a video he digitized that we made that summer as sort of a vision piece for what the future might be. And in it, we thought, God, wouldn't it be cool if like you had some handheld device that you carried with you everywhere and it was always connected to the internet. And maybe with this handheld device, you could like use it as a magic window to look at the world, not like virtual reality, but like augmented, and you could focus it on something and you would see information floating over top of that thing about the world. So the whole video is based on that premise, and it's super, super cheesy.
No, but it's amazing because you're predicting the future. And for our viewers, we did digitize that video before quarantine, and we'll be sure to include the link below alongside of this interview so you can check it. It's called Invisible New York. Yeah,
that's the one.
Yeah. Okay. And to finish up, because I know we don't have too much time left, can you tell us what YORB means to you?
I think for me, what YORB represents is one of the best things about ITP, and that's ITP has always had a tendency to experiment with ways to use technology to support communities. And YORB was not the very last, but one of the last ones that was really a project to support smaller communities. Right? When we went into the sort of booming Web 2.0 era in the early 2000s, all of a sudden, every time somebody wanted to do something community-wise, the immediate notion was, let's scale it up, right? So, you couldn't imagine doing a community now that was only a few hundred or a few thousand people because Facebook, because Twitter, and all of that. And in fact, ironically, one of the people who was in YORB as a student the year before me was Margaret Gould. Margaret's now one of the senior people doing community work at Facebook. But I really loved the fact that YORB was all about let's support local community and find a way for people to talk to each other and to express themselves. And that's something I think we should always try to strive to do at IT.
Definitely one of the goals of YORB 2020 in this time of quarantine is to provide another way for our community to bump into one another on the floor again and collaborate. Tom, thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing. And it's great to have the opportunity to speak to you about this. We would love to see you in person, of course, and everyone in person on the floor. But until then, please stay safe.
I can't wait to see you all in person too, but we'll take it in the YORB for now.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.
YORB 2.0.
Now if you wanna go and get away from it all, go down the
YORB 2.0.
Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you to Bermuda, Bahama, come on pretty mama, Key Largo, Montego, baby, why don't we go down
YORB 2.0.
We'll get there fast and then we'll take it slow. That's where we wanna go. Way down in
YORB 2.0.